this says I'm going to be reacting to the official trailer of the Snyder Cut, and let me go through briefly what is the Snyder Cut. Well, essentially, Zack had his own version of the Justice League, which was taken away from him, and it was redone by Joss Whedon. He legally and technically is the director of that film, but almost everyone recognizes that it's very radically different than what he had planned. Now, Warner Bros. Already shortened his version. It was originally supposed to be a kind of quartet of films with Man of Steel, BVS, with the 2 Justice League movies that would round out the quartet, but they already cut that back. So this is essentially him smashing together Justice League 1 and 2. Now, in broad terms, we are getting basically the same story, but it's still very, very different. In the 2017 version, we only basically had Steppenwolf come to Earth. He destroys a lot of things, tries to gather up these boxes, and the Justice League forms to stop him, and that's basically the whole movie. They resurrect Superman. That's not much of a spoiler because I think they already hinted that Superman is coming back, and we see Superman in the black suit. So Superman does come back somehow, but the details are not elaborated in the Snyder Cut. What's the big difference? Well, probably the most major difference, and the one I was a little bit worried about, was Darkseid. I still think Darkseid looks a little weird. Steppenwolf looks a lot better than before, so that's a great improvement on him. We're also getting a much fuller world because Darkseid was mentioned in the 2017 version, but we really didn't see Apocalypse, and we didn't really see much more than the Parademons. Here we're getting clearly that many more characters from Apocalypse and the New Gods will be in this film. We're also presumably going to get a fuller context because the Amazonians seem to have a history with Darkseid, so presumably we're going to get more on that. And we're going to get a ton of new characters and a ton of new scenes that were never used in the 2017 version. So the CGI looks a little unfinished, so that needs a little bit more work, but that's probably the most major issue. Some people have complained about the aspect ratio. Inevitably, given that this is meant for a film, that they have to change a lot to fit it for the TV screen, you're going to have some loss of continuity and some issues. But I didn't recognize any major issues. But yeah, if you look very closely, the CGI and other things still look undone because, again, they have to use a much smaller budget. Allegedly, they used about $70 million, which seems like a lot of money to the ordinary person, but for a superhero film, like look at something like Avengers Endgame, they just spent about $300 million per film. And that's just on the film, including marketing. Each one costs like $500 million. So $70 million seems like a lot, but again, all things considered, it's a pretty reasonable price for trying to resurrect the earlier cut and trying to make sense of it, because the 2017 version has some good aspects, but it's incredibly disorderly, filled with editing and continuity errors. So it's very hard to focus because, again, they're trying to reshape Zack's vision without his participation, right? They replaced a lot of people and a lot of scenes. Probably the biggest part here that I found intriguing, because I was really skeptical about Ben Affleck as Batman. This one seems much, much more like the Batman I'm comfortable with, because the BVS one was a very dark version based on Frank Miller. This one is much more closer to the canonical Batman, and he sounds closer to Batman in my eyes. There's also an intriguing final scene with Joker, who talks to Batman, and presumably he's actually working with the heroes against Darkseid. So there's a lot to speculate about what's going on. I'm only going to do minor spoilers. I think it's hinted that Superman, quote, the Black Superman, is on Darkseid's side, and he's actually fighting against the heroes. And presumably the Flash somehow with Lois, because Lois was named the key in BVS, is going to do something to alter the timeline or do something to basically defeat Darkseid and bring Superman back, quote, to the good side, and they'll fight against Apocalypse together. So, in broad strokes, we kind of know what the story is. It's going to be the Justice League forming, they're going to fight Darkseid, and they're going to find a way to defeat him. Or maybe not. Again, we have the multiverse that they're setting up, so presumably maybe these events are going to carry over to the next films. Probably the only thing that is really going to, I think, divide people is that this aesthetic is very close to BVS and Man of Steel, and I think many people were hoping that Zack would do something brighter or with more colors. I understand some people will always have issues with Snyder's style and the way he uses colors. I myself didn't like Watchmen that much, so I'm with them that some of his films go too much excessively into the dark. Literally, you can't just see what's going on. But I think this is actually a kind of moderating of the style, and I suspect that near the end, we're going to see a very bright and a lot of colors. Near the conclusion, presumably thematically. But that's my speculation. I'm not as skeptical as I was a couple months ago, even though I do support the Snyder Cut. I do plan to sign up for HBO Max just to see this, but I can only speak for myself. I know some people are still very skeptical, but I think overall we should be supportive of Zack, even if we're not going to sign up for HBO Max or see the film, because I do think this is an incredibly interesting story about how a film that was basically lost and destroyed has been resurrected. All right, this has been Pop Cult Analyzed on a reaction to the Justice League trailer, the official one on HBO Max. I'd happily endorse going to HBO Max and watching it for yourself. It's already got 10 million views, but again, any help you can give Snyder is appreciated. Again, it's just my partisan take. All right, thanks for listening.